Ready? Sissy?
Let's do it. Now, one thing before we dive into this video that I forgot. So you've got R and L left and right cast into the carburetor. That is because there's two different jets. There's two different size jets in the carburetor. So the right is 105 and the left is 108. And don't quote me on that, but that's what was in here. And I just got the cheap plugs, from your local auto parts store, and they're just Autolite 65. Kind of a strange number, but it says Autolite 65 on the plug itself. So, all right, let's dive into this. Magnatrack Junior. I originally put a 13 horsepower Predator engine in here. It was underpowered. I used it for a long time with that engine, a 13 horsepower engine. It was not sufficient, but it got the job done. So eventually I bought a Predator 670, 22 horsepower, and swapped that in here. And actually it was a super simple swap because the bolt pattern on the bottom is the same. The mounting bolt pattern is the same. I had to alter the muffler and cut it in half. And the only reason why I used this muffler is because I wanted it to be quiet. So the first time I fired the 22 horsepower engine up, it ran good. I didn't know, there was no reason to think there was anything wrong with it. It smoked a little bit at first, but I didn't think anything of it because it was the first time I started it. So I shut it back off. Subsequently, I have not ran it ever since. Actually used it to move dirt. So it has been moved up onto a trailer a couple different times and into a storage locker situation. So the last time I put it up onto a trailer and moved it into my garage, it was smoking heavily and not running good at all. So I get it into its parking space here, just barely, and it actually dies right when I get it into the parking space. And then I fired it up again and it wouldn't run if you put a load on it. If you put it into gear, it wouldn't run. So it sat here like that for about a year, and so finally now I'm out here, and so I fired up again. It's super smoky and running rough, so I shut it off. I go down and get a fresh set of plugs, and I pull the old plugs out, and they're super sooty, but they both look the same. I put new plugs in it. I pull the fuel line off right there and test the fuel pump, because the fuel pump is right there. Fuel pump is fine. And like I said, I put the new plugs in there. I fired up. I mess around with the mixture screws to see if I can get it to run better. It smoked when it first fired up, but it ran good because it didn't have the fouled plugs in it. So what was peculiar is the fact that this mixture screw was turned all the way in, and it actually had marks on it at that location. This mixture screw was turned 1.5 turns in, or 1.5 turns out after being seated. 1.5 turns back out. This one was all the way seated. So I thought something was haywire. So I pull the carburetor off, which is pretty easy. Take your air cleaner off, self-explanatory. That clip right there pulls up, and actually the return spring is attached on the bottom, not like that. So pull that clip up, and then the arm pulls straight back towards you. And then once you get that side off, this side, the rod is bent in kind of an S with the return spring right where it is. So that comes right out. This linkage, that clip over there, it pulls to the right, and then the arm pulls straight up. This linkage, once you get the right side out, then this has got, just like the other side, an S in it, and that comes out. Disconnect all your hoses, etc., your fuel line off the top. And then there's an anti-backfire, I believe, solenoid on the bottom of this carburetor. So I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the carburetor up and off once I unbolted the 3 screws. 1, 2 underneath the hoses, 3. So it wouldn't pull up and off of there. Finally, it came up and off, and that's because the connection to the anti-backfire solenoid had come undone. So the wire is too short for you. There's no way in hell I could have got my hand underneath the carburetor to undo that connection. So luckily they came apart by themselves. So when I put it back together, I had to pull the wire as tight as I could, and then I bent the little wire in an S kind of and pushed it through and got it through the casting hole in the bottom of the intake, and then held it with needle nose at the same time as pushing it on to the carburetor connection. And luckily that worked. But that would have been a bitch if I couldn't get the wire any longer. I would have not been able to get that connection together. So anyway, oh, and also there's caps on top of the mixture screws. There's metal caps. It's because they don't want you messing with it. So just drill a little tiny hole in each one, enough to get like a little pick or something in there, and the caps pretty much pull right out. Be really careful though, because you'll damage the brass mixture screws if you go too deep. So just go through the metal on the cap. I pull the carburetor off, I turn it over. You take your 4 bowl screws out. You've got a shiny bowl on the bottom. Take your 4 screws out, and once you take the bowl off, you'll see the 2 brass jets. There's 2 towers with 2 brass jets and slots in them. So take your narrow screwdriver, just like this one, and unscrew the jets out of there. So there's a 108 and there's a 105 jet in there. The reason why they're 2 different jets is because the pathway, the exhaust pipe is basically longer on one side than it is on the other side. So one side needs to be lean, one side needs to be richer. Long story short, I switched the jets around. I put the 105 in the other side, and I put the 108 in the other side. I put it back together. I turn the mixture screws all the way in, and then 2 revolutions out, both sides, all the way in, 2 revolutions out. I fired up, and it runs kind of crappy at first, so I mess around with the mixture screws a little bit to get the cleanest and I guess highest idle, and at that point it was running good. So I turned the screws all the way in on this side to see how many turns they were at. I turned it all the way in and then back out again, and it actually was 2 turns. I turned this one all the way in and back out, and that was 2 turns as well. And what's kind of strange is the fact that there was factory marks where the jet slot lines up, and they were almost the same. But like I said before, this side was turned all the way in from the factory. But if I turned it out 2 turns, it still didn't run any better. It actually didn't do anything when I turned that in and out, that mixture screw. So anyway, so I fired up, I got it all, it runs good. So that was the issue. The jets were backwards in the carburetor from the factory. I have not seen a YouTube video on here that says this, and I've gone through quite a few of the videos trying to research, and then online forums. But anyway, yeah, if your MagnaTrack is running crappy and smoking a lot, that could be your issue. All right, thanks for watching.